Everyone's life is driven by something. Most dictionaries will define the verb drive as to guide, as to direct, to control. And I want to ask you, what's the driving force in your life? You may be driven by a problem you're facing in your life. You may be driven by some pressure or the pressures in life, or you may be driven by a deadline, or the deeper stuff, you may be driven by a painful memory, a haunting fear, or unconscious beliefs. You may be driven by things that you're not even aware exist. You may not even know what is driving your life. There's hundreds of circumstances, different values we can hold, all the different emotions we feel as we go through life. Hundreds of circumstances, values, and emotions can drive our life. And in this chapter of the book, Purpose Driven Life by Rick Warren, he's talking about the drivers in life. And he talks about the 5 most common drivers. And I'm going to go over this. In this chapter is day number 3 in a spiritual journey. Just a reminder, the way he lays out the book, he has these 40 chapters. Each one is supposed to be its own lesson, and he wants you to go through them one lesson per day. And so he has these 40 days of a spiritual journey. I've read the book in the past and I did it that way, Great Spiritual Journey. I'm going through it again, and I'm going through it slowly. And I'm really studying these lessons. And I'm sharing what I'm learning from it, sharing the lessons themselves from the book. But I'm going to share a little bit into my life too as I go through this. So this one's going to be a little bit of a longer video, but a lot of great stuff to go through here. And I'm going to go through each of these 5 most common drivers that he's talking about in the book. I'm also going to talk about how he says there's these benefits to living through purpose. Obviously, he's talking about these 5 most common drivers as less than ideal. So the lesson in this chapter is basically catch yourself being driven by some of these things and stop that, and instead clarify purpose so that can drive your life instead. I'm going to list them real quick, 1 through 5. The 5 most common drivers are: number 1, guilt. Number 2 is resentment and anger. Number 3 is fear. Number 4 is materialism. And number 5 is need for approval. So we're looking at some of these things as emotions, and some of these are more like values and circumstances. And I'm going to dive in one at a time to explain what he means by these things as drivers in your life. When he talks about guilt being one of the most common drivers for people, he's talking about how people are running from their regrets and they're hiding their shame. When people are driven by guilt, it's like they're manipulated by their memories. They allow the past to control their future. And they unconsciously punish themselves by sabotaging their own success. So it's like they most of the time don't even realize this is what's happening, but because they feel guilt about something in the past, then they don't allow themselves to experience good things into the future. when you hear that, you understand easily that, okay, that's limiting. That's limiting your life. You should probably not let that happen. But when it's happening to you, right, or when it's happening to me, it's like it's hard for me to see that. It's hard for me to realize, hey, I'm being driven by guilt. And so at times, emotions are so powerful within us, and it's just our own personal experience of these emotions. Of course, people can empathize or people can relate to what we're going through, but nobody feels or feeling the same way we do. And so nobody knows it like we do. But nonetheless, sometimes we don't even realize how guilt is showing up this way in our lives as a driver. And for me, I don't feel like my whole life is driven by any of these things, especially because I've been thinking about purpose for a while. But I think it's the case, like, even if I wasn't thinking about purpose so much, I'm going to think about, maybe you don't think about purpose this much like I have been. Now maybe you're tuning into it, but before this, maybe not. Maybe, yeah. Nonetheless, all of us can at times allow guilt to drive us. And of course, the book that I'm studying here always relates back to the Bible. So the story in the Bible you can follow to understand this a little better is about Cain. Cain, one of the sons of Adam and Eve. So you go follow the story of Cain, but what's important to relate back here in the lesson is that his guilt for what he had done disconnected him from God's presence. And I want to explain what that means, but I don't think it's best to do it now. So without getting into all that and complicating this, I'm going to just quote what they're saying in the Bible, that he became a restless wanderer on earth. And what Rick Warren, the author of this book that I'm reading, what he says is that most people are living life this way. Most people live life just wandering through life without purpose. So when you live like that, it's like you don't really have direction. You're just wandering, right? You don't know where you're trying to get to. and we are all of us are products of our past. But the main takeaway for me here is that even though we are products of our past, we don't have to be prisoners of it. That's what's happening with people who are driven by guilt. And that's what's happening to us in any instance that we're driven by guilt. Even if our whole life is not driven by guilt, let's try to find where that might be showing up. God's purpose is not limited by your past. The second most common driver he's talking about is resentment and anger. And he describes these people as holding on to hurts and pain, and they can never get over it. Instead of releasing pain through forgiveness, they rehearse it over and over again in their minds. And some resentment-driven people, they clam up and they internalize their anger. So it's not necessarily showing as much as they're feeling this. But other people who are driven by resentment, they do blow up and they explode this anger on others. And then you can tell what's happening. You can tell they're being driven by this resentment and anger. And it's obvious that it's not good. It's obvious to them. It's obvious to others. It might not be as obvious to them as it is to others, right? But both responses are unhealthy and unhelpful. Some people clam up. They're internalizing their anger, which is very dangerous because you're like inflicting the pain over and over again on yourself. And other people blow up and they try to throw that anger onto other people. both ways of dealing with this feeling is unhealthy and unhelpful, unproductive. It doesn't really solve anything in your life. And that's what Rick Warren wants to talk about. He says resentment always hurts you more than the offender. Because when you think about it, the offender just moves on most of the time. They might be one of the people dealing with guilt, right? But most of the time, these offenders move on and they forget. So while their life has not been much affected by what they've done to you, you somehow continue to hurt from this. You stew in your pain and perpetuate the past, is the way Rick Warren puts it. And the offenders, they continue to hurt you. And it's not because they intend to hurt you again, but somehow they continue to hurt you because you hold on to the pain. So your choice, your thinking causes them to hurt you without them intending to at all. Again and again and again. That's what your resentment is. So when you think about it, your bitterness is only hurting you. And it's not productive in any other way. I think sometimes people are confused. They're thinking like, so this feeling of resentment has them just all totally confused in the head. And they're thinking, I'm mad. No, I'm never going to forgive them. I'm mad. And I think sometimes, right, like the idea of revenge is like holding on to that feeling means somehow I must settle the score. I'm not going to let this go. When I have my opportunity to get even, I'm going to take that. So you like want to hold on to it. And so you start confusing yourself to think that it's helping your situation to hold on to that feeling, to hold on to a negative feeling towards a person who's done a negative thing to you. And the lesson that we're supposed to learn from the Bible is about forgiveness. And that forgiveness is not to benefit the offender, but it's to benefit you. And so when you hold on to that feeling and you let yourself be driven by resentment and anger, it's not doing anything for you. Sometimes you're confused about it and you're thinking that it is a good thing to stay mad. Another one that he says is fear, right? Fear is one of the most common drivers for people. And he's saying that like fears can be a result of traumatic experience. They can be a result of some type of unrealistic expectations. They could be a result of growing up in a high control environment, like the way it was at home when you were growing up. Maybe your parents super strict or something, and or like parenting style using authority or instilling fear, or maybe a genetic predisposition. He actually says that. So somehow in your genes, you may be more scared than the average person. But what the real danger about this is that these people who are driven by fear often miss great opportunities, even when they know they are great opportunities. And it's because they're too afraid to venture out. And you know, they want to play it safe and avoid risks and maintain the status quo. It's a little fancy word that means like we want to keep things the same, because the risk of changing things and making things much worse is like too scary, right? Than changing things to hope maybe something better comes from the change. Fear is a self-imposed prison. Is a great way that he puts it. And it's poetic to remember that, right? Like fear is this self-imposed prison. How exactly does that play out, right? I'd love to study that more like psychologically, on the psychological side, but sticking to spirituality here, what we have to understand as this self-imposed prison is that when you let yourself be driven by fear, you're allowing this blockage from becoming what God intends for you to be. When you move against fear with faith and love, it seems that the fear just kind of dissipates. So the best way to deal with this type of situation is to move towards something instead of trying to move away from the fear. You move towards something, and by doing that, naturally the fear will kind of go away. So it's hard not to pay attention to the fear, because that's what, psychologically, what we would find out is that fear is, when we're having that feeling of fear, what's going on in our brain is actually like empowering to our brain, to a lot of our function. Like brain function is empowering. It's because when we're scared, it's like, hey, be careful because there may be a real danger. So the problem, though, is that if you're thinking that way about a situation that is not dangerous, then you're actually not going to make decisions according to your situation and what you really want. You're going to be confused about what the situation is and about what it means to go for what you really want. But the way to address this problem is to move towards faith and love. So when you think about faith, we're talking about not having to know everything, not needing proof. You don't need proof to know something. How do you know something without proof? There's plenty of things we know without proof necessarily. There's plenty of things that we know and have proof for, and we don't understand how it works. You don't have to understand everything, but sometimes the proof is in your face. Like, we don't have to understand how gravity works, but the proof is in our face. Objects come to the ground. They don't just fly off the planet that easily. At least if a force greater than the force of gravity pulling down towards the planet pulls an object away from the planet, then of course, yeah, it leaves the planet. All right, anyways, that's physics. So we can study things like that way, but to make it simple, it's like gravity is an example where we have proof. We don't understand everything about how that's working, but we know it to be true. But we also have faith in other ways where it's like we will never have proof. We just know the thing. We just know the thing to be true. I'll give you a great example of that in another conversation if you want to dive into faith more. But this is the idea of faith, okay? Moving with faith means you move towards things because you know and don't need proof, and because you know you don't need to understand everything. And you move with love. And so the idea of love, the definition I always put to it that helps, I think, is doing things for others without regard for a benefit to yourself. And that's what love is. So when you move towards faith and love, you're going to naturally just dissipate the fear that you're feeling. I'm going to pull a quote that he pulls from the Bible and includes in the book. And it says, well-formed love banishes fear. Since fear is crippling, a fearful life, fear of death, fear of judgment, is one not yet fully formed. And this is in 1 John, the 1 John, chapter 4, verse 18. 1 John 4:18 in the Messenger version of the Bible. He also talks about materialism. Materialism is a common driver for many people out there. And the tough thing about this one is that for people who are driven by materialism, they're most likely not easily going to be interested in this topic of spirituality and purpose. Like, they're not tuning into that part of life, because the opposite is this materialism thing. So it's tough. I think certain moments in life that show them material things or not everything will kind of make them think different, right? But that's what's tough. These other things are feelings, so like it's just very, all humans feel them. We all have guilt at times, we all feel anger at times, and we all feel fear at times. So these are just human feelings that we're all going to feel, and we just have to not let our life be driven by them. But materialism is like a value. It's different. Like feelings can be involved in this whole thing, but people who are driven by materialism, it's a way of thinking. What they feel is this desire to acquire. That becomes the goal of life, acquiring, right? And it's a human thing to have that feeling, to desire to acquire, but they make this the whole goal of life. So they get stuck in that way of thinking. And the feeling is not even the main factor anymore. They just keep thinking that way, which perpetuates the feeling. This drive is based on misconceptions about having more, meaning that they're going to be more happy. We can see how many of us can see how that's not true. I imagine you've already tuning into spirituality to some degree to be listening to me this long. I mean, what are we at, 20 minutes or something? So you probably know this already, but having more doesn't mean you're going to be more happy, more important, or more secure. That's what they believe. Thus, they want more and more. It's natural that we want to be more and more happy, but you can find enough happiness from such a thing, or you reach enough happiness in a particular area of your life at a given time in your life. You can reach that enoughness. And when we're talking about materialism things, it's like it's never going to be enough, because that will never give you more and more happiness. Possessions provide this temporary happiness, because the things we're acquiring do not change. When we acquire it, it is the thing. In general, when you just think about material things versus the non-material things, the material things are what they are, and they're not changing. But we do change. So what we want from material things, it will change over time. We get bored. We want newer. We want bigger. We want better. And self-worth and net worth are not the same thing. So your value is not determined by your valuables. The most valuable things in life are not actually physical things at all. And so the big myth here is that having more money will make me more secure. That's like the big myth that we have to deal with, because even for myself, people like myself, we're not driven by materialism, yet something here is still pulling us, and it's feeling the need for financial security. I was a financial advisor when I was fresh. I became a financial advisor. Like fresh out of college, I went into finance. I ended up getting all licensed up and everything. I became a financial advisor. And so what I was talking to with clients on a regular basis is financial security. And I saw it as something super important, and I still see it as something very important. But that's a part of the physical things in life that are important. There's deeper things in life that are not physical, more important. And the big myth, and even though I know this, right, like I'm telling you this now, and I'd be able to tell you years ago too, but the reason why I still feel compelled and being pulled by the need for financial security is because I believe, I have been believing, right, like before, and now I'm like saying, hey, I don't believe that anymore. The myth was that having more money will make me more secure. When you're thinking financial security, yeah, more money makes me more secure. But why is that? Real quick, I'm just going to dive into that real quick. The reason it is because we want to, when a simple financial security is like having enough money to pay the bills, right? And we know that we're going to have to keep paying the bills. So long as we're alive, each month we have bills to pay. So we can account for having enough money to pay the bills this month, and we can account for having enough money to pay bills the next month. And so the more and more money we have, it's like the more months into the future we're accounting to be able to cover. So if I have 3 months worth of my expenses saved up, then I know like 3 months into the future has security, financial security. So financially, yeah, like more money helps, but having more and more financial security does less and less for me in my life. Like the amount of happiness and fulfillment I can get from money when my financial security is at this level is really high. And even when my financial security is here, money still does a lot for my life. So like getting more and more money makes a lot of sense, right? But as my financial security starts to go really high, like if my financial security is already really high, more and more money does give me more financial security, but doesn't do as much for my life as it used to. Because now the things that I need to work on the most at that point are things that money doesn't buy. So hopefully that makes some sense. But in the book, when he's talking about this myth that having more money will make me more secure, he says, look, wealth can be lost instantly for a variety of just different reasons. You can just lose it all. So it doesn't matter how much money you got because it can all go away. And if you're interested in the circumstances in which that could happen for somebody, we can dive into that in another conversation. Comment on this to let me know if that's like something of interest for you. I don't want to be going off into too many tangents when I'm going over these lessons from the book, but I realize, there's some good juicy topics to dive into further. And so if that's catching your attention, let me know. We can dive in on that. Or if you want it in a private conversation, hit me up. But I'm always looking to see like what else I should be talking about in my content. The myth is that having more money will make me more secure. In financial planning, like financial security, can kind of make sense. But remember, wealth can be lost instantly for whatever reason. A lot of different reasons. Uncontrollable factors are at play there. The real security is found in your relationship with God. And guess what? Nothing can take that away from you. If it's by the way, if it's uncomfortable to hear the word God or to say the word God, it's not necessarily that you have to have a strong belief in the Christian God. You don't even have to believe that Jesus Christ and the whole story is real. You actually don't have to share those beliefs with me to talk about these things. You actually don't need all those same beliefs to live a purpose-driven life. And if I'm a Christian, then what the Bible says is I'm supposed to help you accept Jesus Christ. And I'd love to do that, right? But like, how really can I get you to believe that? You have to see it for yourself. My belief didn't come from people making me and having me. I learned faith. I learned habits that helped me walk in faith and walk in love, right? My family had me practicing that way of living, to walk in faith and walk in love. But as I became an intellectual, starting my adulthood and going to college and stuff, and seeking wisdom through academia and the sciences, and taking my life into my own hands and stuff, and feeling like I have to get out and do things for myself. I didn't have God and Jesus Christ in my life like that. And then at one point, I felt Jesus touching me and pulling on my heart. And hard to describe, and I can give a story in another conversation, but the point is that that's how it happened for me, and so that's how it will happen for you if it hasn't already, or if it has, but you've been missing the presence of the Holy Spirit. It will happen for you again. If it's in God's plan for you to be awakened and connected to Jesus Christ spiritually, then that's how it's going to happen for you. I'm not going to make it happen for you. I can't push you to do that. It's not something that you can craft and do. So you don't even have to believe in Jesus Christ, but let's talk about this, because if you live by purpose, you will have a great life. Be atheist, be agnostic, be Muslim, be Buddhist, whatever, religious and like higher power stuff, whatever metaphysical beliefs you have. It's the concepts that I'm talking about. So the words can be tricky, but it's the concepts. Please bear with me. Replace the word God with the universe. At some point in the future, I will do that. I will be using the word universe instead. Point back to this video right here where I say it. But you'll see that I do a little switch, and I'm going to use a lot of universe instead of the word God. But keep it 100 right now. I'm learning these things through the Christian faith. The last one that he talks about as being the most common driver for people is the need for approval. So this one's super important to talk about. I'm going to make it quick. People who are driven by the need for approval, they allow expectations of others to control their lives, like their parents or their peers. Peer pressure. Unfortunately, right, you follow the crowd and you get lost in it. And what's happening with them is it's a key to failure. It's kind of, I'm gonna say it simple because then we can understand it. When you start to break it down, then it gets tough to understand. But it's a real key to failure, to be controlled by the opinions of others, or trying to please everyone. That's a guaranteed way to miss God's purpose. That's what Rick Warren says in this chapter. He quotes the Bible where it says, no one can serve two masters. And so you have to first realize that God, the universe, something greater than you, is the master, the true master that you are here to serve. And there's a purpose laid out for you already. Your job is to understand that more clear enough at least, so that you know how to live your life. Let that drive your life. And if you're helping people, you're doing things that people would like you to do anyways, then that's a great coincidence. But that is not the objective, to allow other people's opinions dictate what you do. And it's not your objective to try to please other people. But if you so happen to be very pleasing while you're serving God's purpose, then I guess that was a part of the purpose. So when he talks about these drivers, and he's saying there's probably more things that can be driving people. He says all these different drivers besides purpose, they all lead to a dead end. They lead to unused potential, unnecessary stress, and unfulfilled life. It sucks because that's when you're thinking like life is not worth it. And I'm going to read something word for word directly how he puts it. He says, "Nothing matters more than knowing God's purpose for your life, and nothing can compensate for not knowing them. Not success, not wealth, fame, nor pleasure. Without purpose, life is motion without meaning, activity without direction, and events without reason." The He's going to get into the benefits. It's a long chapter. I warned you, but he's going to get into the benefits of purpose driven living. When you live this way, knowing your purpose, letting it guide you. Number one, it's going to give meaning to your life. Number two, it's going to simplify your life. Number four, it's going to focus your life. Number three is focus your life. Number four, it's going to motivate your life. And number five, it's going to prepare you for eternity. I want to go through some of my notes on these things. When he's saying like it gives meaning to your life, this is important because when life has meaning, you can bear almost anything. And without feeling life's meaning, nothing is bearable. A young man wrote, this is what he writes in the book. He says, a young man wrote, "I feel like a failure because I'm struggling to become something and I don't even know what it is." And that hit home hard for me because I remember at different times in my life, even recently one time, um, I had that feeling like, dude, I'm like a failure. Like I know I'm being called to something bigger. I'm supposed to do something different. Like I have that feeling like I'm supposed to, and it's like, what is it? At times in my life, I had like opened up to people who were very close to me, and so like I'm just venting, right? And it's like they could ask me just a question, be like, okay, I think I see what's going on, but like, what is it that you need to do? What is it that you that you're trying to do? What do you feel like you want? What do you really want? I'm like, I don't know. And I don't think it's about me knowing what I want. I think it's about being called to something. Like my life is a mission while I'm here on earth. There's something or things that I'm supposed to do. And in the book, Rick Warren says, hey, that's how we were made. We were made to have meaning. And that's why people naturally feel like they want to discover that. And some people, they use astrology to find meaning, like the horoscope, zodiac signs, all that stuff. Some people, like, they use the sciences to find meaning. That's what they're really doing a lot of times. And they're trying to use methods that he calls uncertain, right? Because in the Christian faith, the certainty comes from God's word. And what I want to explain here to help drive this home a little bit deeper is something he was talking about, how like hope is as essential to life as air and water. Hope, right? There's a guy named Dr. Bernie Siegel who could predict which cancer patients would go into remission and which ones would survive. And he could predict this by asking this one question. He would ask them, "Do you want to live to be 100 years old?" And those who said yes, they survived. They had a deep sense of purpose, life purpose, that made them say yeah. But those who didn't have that deep sense of life purpose, they couldn't just easily tell him yes, like, or honestly, truthfully, you know. It didn't matter like about them putting words to this sense of purpose, just at the way they're answering that question. If they didn't say yes, then he could see where they're going. Hope comes from having a purpose. And God gives purpose, which gives meaning and significance, right? So we feel hope. Hope is the feeling that we're getting. And the greatest tragedy is not death. It's life without purpose. The study by this doctor that I just described was to prove that you need hope to cope. And there's like other studies that go through this, but like you need to have this positive feeling about the future in order to deal with hard things. And life is full of hard things. So you could say, in order to go through life, you have to have hope. In order to be alive, you have to have some hope. And without it, you couldn't get through the hard things. So these hard things are going to bog you down, weaken you. Eventually, a hard thing will take your life. But with hope, you get through the hard thing. He talks about simplifying your life, right? Because when you're clear on your purpose, this defines what you do and what you don't do. That's simple. You do these things because it aligns with your purpose, and you don't do these other things. It doesn't align. Your purpose becomes the standard you use to evaluate which activities are essential and which aren't. Those are his words. Great combination of words to explain this. And you simply ask yourself, does this activity help me fulfill one of God's purposes for my life? Or not? And if it doesn't, then you remove it from your life. People try to do too much when they don't know their purpose. Start doing too much. And that causes stress, fatigue, and conflict. Without clear purpose as a foundation to base decisions, to allocate your time, to determine how you're going to use your resources, you'll tend to make choices based on circumstances, on pressures, and whatever your mood is at the moment. But what this lesson is all about is that you have just enough time to do God's will. If you ever feel like you can't get it all done, it's because you're doing too much. You are trying to do more than what God intended for you to do. It's a sign that you got to realign. You got to go back to this purpose. What is God's purposes for your life? Or maybe you're watching too much TV, is what he says in the book. Or maybe you're watching too much TV and you're just not getting things done. But I know for me, I felt that a lot of times. Like, man, I can't get it. There's not enough time in the day. I can't get it all done. And I had to take a step back and be like, you know what? I'm trying to do too much. I only have 24 hours a day, 168 hours a week. It's impossible to do everything that people want you to do, right? So we were talking about how that is not the objective. You only have enough time. You have just enough time to do God's will. A simpler life is a saner life. He says that a pretentious, oh no, this is a quote from the Bible that he pulls out, and I noted it because I wanted to make sure I have it for myself, but I think I'm going to read it. A pretentious, showy life is an empty life. A plain and simple life is a full life, found in Proverbs 13:7, the Messenger version of that Bible. The simpler life is going to give you peace of mind. That's the whole point there, right? It also is going to focus your life. So when you're clear on purpose, you focus your life. You concentrate all your effort and your energy on just one thing, serving God's purpose. And so only the important things get fit into your life, but because you're focused, you start to make big progress on the most important things. This is being effective by being selective. Great combination of words. Many people live lives of aimless distraction. That's Rick Warren's words. Love it. Aimless distraction. It's human nature to get distracted by minor issues. The real problem is that we lack focus and purpose, right? And so I've had to understand this from my life, but it's like we go thinking like, all right, you know what, I'm gonna change jobs, or fix relationships, or just change like remove relationships, change churches, change things on the external, hoping like this time it's gonna be different. He says, hoping each change will settle your confusion or fill an emptiness in your heart. But it doesn't solve the real problem. The real problem is that there's a lack of focus and purpose. So it's like on a bigger, grander scale, we need to be driven by the purpose. We need to have something focusing our life that's not about things that make us happy, okay? So focusing your life is a huge benefit to this purpose thing. One example he goes over is like when you think about light, diffused light is not dangerous, or has little power, like just my light bulb. See my light bulb? It's glaring, so you know there's energy there, but it's not gonna hurt like the sun hurts. Or like super focused light can cut through steel, right? You concentrate the light energy into a laser beam, and that can cut through steel. Even like a magnifying glass concentrates the sunlight, and you can set grass on fire. So this is the power of focusing your life by purpose. He says a focused life is one of the most potent things in the universe. If you want your life to have impact, focus it. Stop dabbling. Stop trying to do it all. Do less. Prune away good activities. Prune away even good activities. And only keep that which matters most. Never confuse activity with productivity. You can be busy without purpose. Knowing your purpose also motivates your life. Purpose always produces passion. Nothing energizes like a clear purpose. And passion dissipates when you lack purpose. Naturally, something you are passionate about at one time will not make you passionate anymore after enough time, unless that passion is coming from purpose. He also explains how meaningless work, not overwork, wears us down, saps our energy, and robs our joy, right? So like when for example, like some people go to their job, and they come out feeling tired. And it's not that they were overworked in the job. It's that the work was meaningless. Meaningless work, not overwork, wears us down, saps our energy, and robs our joy. If This same person who gets tired, who feels super tired coming out of an 8-hour shift, if this same person had a different job where they were spent more of their time serving God's purposes, they could work 12 hours, 16-hour shifts, come out of that job and not even feel that tired like they did from the 8-hour job. The true joy in life, this one, so Bernard Shaw says this quote right here. He says, the true joy in life, right, is being used up for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one, being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clot of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. Being used up for a purpose. Knowing your purpose in life also prepares you for eternity. I'm going to be brief about this one. Check out the Bible if you want to learn more about this part. But you were put here to prepare for eternity, not to be remembered on earth. There's a difference between your eternal legacy and your earthly legacy. Everyone is eventually forgotten on earth. At some point, there is one person left who remembers you, right? At some point into the future, you're dead, maybe your kids are dead, and there's one person left who remembers you, who you were. But besides them, nobody else really knows about you. Maybe they're not talking about you. And so when they pass, there will be nobody left who knows about you. And so for every one of us, that eventually happens here on earth. We are forgotten. Given enough time, all your trophies will be trashed by someone else. There's another quote said by, I think it was an athlete who was mailed one of his trophies from a high school, right? He broke records and stuff. And then someone found his trophy in a trash can, mailed it to him. And that's a lot about like how we think of legacy. God asks 2 questions before you enter eternity. What did you do with my son, Jesus Christ? And what did you do with what I gave you? What did you do with your life? All the gifts, talents, opportunities, all the energy I gave you, the relationships and the resources. What did you do with all that God gave you? That's what he's going to ask. So the book, Rick Warren says, this book, the goal of this book is to prepare us for these 2 questions. The first question determines where you spend eternity. The second question determines what you do in eternity.